afternoon, friends. First of all, before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Brittany. I use she, her pronouns. And good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today with us as we gather to celebrate and share the work that we've poured our hearts and souls into for the last 2 years. Before we begin, I'd like to hold a moment of gratitude for all of the wonderful people that have contributed to this work. I could not have done this alone, and I forever appreciate the time and care that all of you have shared with me throughout the course of the project. You are the reason that this project has made it this far, and you are the reason that this work will continue after graduation. I'm here today to talk to you about a social and public health issue very close to my heart, which is hearing health. Hearing loss is one of the most prevalent conditions affecting Americans today. People with a recorded hearing loss or barrier to sound may also identify as deaf or hard of hearing. Historically, deafness has been defined by medical diagnoses and terms, but these are not the only things that define how people access sound. Hearing and deafness is more of a spectrum, and people access sound differently. So I'm making a decision here to explore more open and inclusive language around sound and hearing health, with the goal of holding space for people like myself that are navigating the in-betweens. You may not be able to tell at first glance, but I identify as hard of hearing. I have a mild, moderate hearing loss, and I use hearing aids in some settings to help me access sound. My mother, my closest and dearest friend, also wears hearing aids, and she has for many, many years. She began to notice a difference in her hearing levels in high school, beginning her hearing journey at a young age. It was very challenging for her, often isolating and straining on social relationships. Because of her experience, she was proactive in getting my hearing tested every year. And luckily, I was fitted with hearing aids, but after that, I was essentially thrown to the wind. I wasn't quite sure how to go about navigating the emotions that I was feeling, having learned that I would be experiencing the world differently than I had grown accustomed to. About 5 years into my journey, I have just begun to embrace my identity as a hard of hearing person, embracing my hearing journey, asking for help, and wearing my hearing aids. I'm learning to speak up about my hearing needs with peers, and I've begun navigating my identity as a young, hard of hearing person. But it was only after dedicating time to some serious self-reflection and noticing, seeking out resources, and speaking to other people with hearing loss that I began to really step into my identity. Of the 48 million Americans with a recorded hearing loss, there are approximately 15 million that do not seek any sort of assistance, and those that do typically wait an average of 7 years to do so. So why is this gap important? This delay in seeking assistance becomes problematic when we look at the long-term effects of hearing loss. According to Johns Hopkins Medicine, social isolation encouraged by hearing loss can cause deaf and hard of hearing folks to be more likely to experience anxiety and depression. And later in life, hearing loss can also place folks at greater risk for brain atrophy and dementia. This is because the longer a hearing loss goes unnoticed or untreated, the greater loss of sound discrimination skills, or the ability to differentiate and distinguish between different sounds. In this case especially, if you don't use it, you lose it. Now, because of this, I wondered, why are folks waiting so long to seek assistance? What are the internal and external barriers that they may be experiencing, and what can we do? What tools and experiences can we create to help folks recognize and challenge these barriers? I knew my personal journey and experiences, but I wanted to learn from other folks about hearing loss. Although I am a stakeholder, I couldn't base my project off of my own biases and assumptions. In my research, I collected stories from 44 other people, some with hearing loss, some without, and the survey responses, coupled with several interviews, confirmed that my personal experiences and challenges finding resources and community early in my hearing journey was not uncommon among others with hearing loss. From my research, I've identified the following insights and opportunities. Teens and young adults in particular are an underserved group by existing organizations and resources. 1 in 5 teens have some degree of hearing loss, but existing organizations connect best with children and older adults. Because of this, there's an opportunity to reach out to this community of people in need, especially as they begin to learn about taking control of their own health. People are rarely aware of emergent changes in their sound access due to lack of testing and lack of reflection. Unless their physicians are proactively testing for hearing loss, which less than 16% do, it's impossible for people to know if they may benefit from help. So how can we expect them to seek out assistance if they don't know that they might benefit from it? Current practices, tools, and languages often subscribe to a medical model of disability that is polarizing and confines deafness to just medical diagnoses and terms. So there's an opportunity here to design with care, to center deafness as a spectrum existing beyond a clinical diagnosis and focus on more holistic reflection around the role of sound in our lives. And finally, most Americans do not approach the topics of sound access or hearing health with openness, if at all. So there's a huge opportunity here to encourage more discussion around access to sound and deafness, to foster more openness around the topic. And so I wonder, how might we empower young people in the United States to challenge barriers to sound access at early stages of their hearing journeys and beyond by fostering a greater sense of openness around hearing health? I settled on a collection of goals for whatever the intervention might be. To design an experience centered around sound that young people feel is worthy of sharing with their peers, to showcase and celebrate lived experiences of folks with hearing loss, to engage with young people and hold space for them to reflect on the role of sound in their lives, to share tools and frameworks that encourage more holistic reflection and open dialogue around sound access and hearing health, and demonstrate deafness, hearing, and access to sound as a spectrum through the use of inclusive language and the sharing of experiences in a safe environment, and of course, to jumpstart new hearing journeys. After much research and consideration, I settled on a concept for an intervention, which is Find Your Frequency, a series of gatherings organized to facilitate open dialogue, reflection, and curiosity around hearing health and the role of sound in our lives, supplemented by an online community dubbed the Resonation. In testing the prototype, I hosted 2 digital gatherings and 1 in-person gathering, with an intended audience of young adults ages 17 to 35, with an interest in exploring the role of sound in their lives, but anyone with an interest in hearing health and sound access was welcome to participate. So, what makes this particular intervention different? Find Your Frequency targets a demographic that is essentially unreachable by current efforts, rejects the medical model and polarized definition of deafness, and creates a space for talking with rather than at community with a focus on connection, and encourages more holistic reflection around sound access. In preparing for the event, I made a flyer, which I reso printed and distributed around SVA, online, and through my personal network. And I was really struggling to get some responses at first, so in an effort to get more people to come to the event, I set up a little sign in the library and sat there with a bag of candy to try and get people to come and talk, and I actually ended up getting a participant through this strategy, which was really exciting. For the digital gatherings, I leveraged free online tools like Google Meet and Figma that provided video conferencing, captions, and other modes of collective creation. The gatherings walked participants through introductions for trust building, a core discussion, and finally a closing reflection. And I found that the groups of 5 to 6 that I worked with were a great size for these small group discussions. People were able to get a little bit vulnerable, and everybody had an opportunity to share their perspective on each discussion question. The in-person gathering was a curated experience with 4 different activities created in SVA Library West with the goal of meeting young people where they are to focus on connecting them around sound access. So the activities were constructed in a loop, much like a journey, and people were invited to cycle through the conversation corner, free hearing assessment station, story gallery, and the end of experience reflection. So I'm going to do a quick little walkthrough of these different activities now. The conversation corner was guided by cards with prompts and questions, and the main goal here was to hold space for conversation and connection and see if there was an opportunity to open some people's eyes to the importance of hearing health, especially in young people. Then folks were invited to visit the hearing assessment station, where there were instructions on how to access an existing free hearing assessment resource. And the goal here was to increase the number of assessments completed and encourage more reflection around individual hearing levels and how people communicate with each other. And then there was the story gallery, where I posted some of the stories that I had collected from the community, and people just provided an opportunity to share and honor lived experiences for people with hearing loss and encourage those that were reading these stories to add their own and reflect on how sound has impacted their life. And then finally, at the end, I invited people to share an end of experience reflection so that it was a reflection moment for them and they could contemplate on how the experience influenced them. And then it also helped me understand how the experience affected them and allowed me to evaluate the prototypes that I could iterate on it. So evaluating the impact of this, I was very pleasantly surprised with the feedback, and the prototype succeeded in creating a space and experience that sparked curiosity and action, established new connections and conversations around hearing health and sound access among the participants, and also increased awareness and openness around hearing health among all the event participants. So this work must continue, and it's very important, and so I'm making sure that it does. Looking forward, I'm going to continue sharing the work in settings such as these. I'll be collaborating continuously with my community partner, HLAA, and sharing this work at their June meeting. I'm hoping to collaborate with more organizations. I'm currently pursuing discussions with SVA's Disability Resources Center to hopefully work with them on some programming for the fall, and aspiring for scalability. I think if this goes well here at SVA, I'd love to bring it into other professional development programs, possibly high schools and other institutions of higher education. And of course, as I continue this work, I'm still on my own hearing journey, so I'll be continuing to explore what hearing health and sound access mean to me, and continuing to share that with the world and all of you. Thank you so much for your time today.